education programs, worked on their urban mini farm, written grants, and managed the growth of the social enterprise. Before she joined Community Services Unlimited, she worked on public policy campaigns at the state and national levels aimed at supporting local food systems and ensuring food justice. And then finally, Dr. Nate Churches is the co-founder and chief science officer of Holdfast Aquaculture, where he applies high-level science to develop sustainable seafood products for the region. During his PhD at the University of Southern California, Nate built an experimental shellfish hatchery on Catalina Island. So three very competent and speakers who are experts in this field. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass it over to Amalia to start presenting.
All right, let me get this up and going. First, I just want to give a big thank you to Maggie and Brianna and the CELC Aquaculture Initiative for the invitation to be here, and thank you all for taking the time to be here today as well. Again, I'm Amalia from CELC Grant. I'm really excited to be co-presenting with Heather Fenney and Nathan Churches to speak to our pilot project that we executed in summer of 2021 and talk about our plans for the future related to improving equitable access to locally farmed seafood through the South Central Los Angeles Sustainable Seafood Hub. I want to start by saying that the three of us are here on behalf of an incredible team of Aquaculture Partners, community partners, educators, and researchers who supported this pilot project and are listed here. So a quick outline of what we will be covering over the next 45 minutes or so. We'll be speaking to the what and why of seafood hubs broadly, how the seed of an idea for a seafood hub in South Central Los Angeles emerged. We'll get to hear from the lead partners of this effort, Community Services Unlimited and Holdfast Aquaculture, who they are and why they launched this project. We'll then dive into the pilot project we completed in July 2021, speaking to the objectives, approach, outcomes, and community feedback. We'll then zoom out and talk about the lessons learned that may be particularly relevant to this audience of aquaculture educators. And we'll talk about our hopes and plans for the future to build off the momentum of this pilot. We'll close with an ask for all of you here today for input in some particular areas we're looking to expand in our education program for this effort. Really excited to have a discussion with all of you as well and hear your input. All right, so first I'm going to zoom out and provide some context for the what and why of seafood hubs broadly before we transition to our pilot efforts. So generally, food hubs provide infrastructure to get locally produced food to local consumers. Food hubs allow smaller scale producers to access larger and more stable markets than they would on their own because they're being supported with marketing, aggregation, and distribution by the hub entity itself. So this concept of food hubs has really taken off over the last 20 years or so, driven by growing desire of consumers to purchase food grown locally. And something that's also really powerful about food hubs is that the short supply chain allows for most revenues to be reinvested in local communities. And although food hubs do look very different from place to place, many hold a space in the community that allows for a unique and deep engagement and consumer education about the foods being distributed through the hub. Many food hubs are also values driven, so working to support and amplify producers that are aligned in values regarding environmental and even social practices. And it's also been shown that in high density urban settings, local food hubs can be very effective in providing high quality, fresh, and affordable food, providing food security. So in the US currently, most food hubs are focused on distributing locally produced vegetables and some animal products, but there's a growing number of seafood hubs or seafood networks emerging to make seafood more financially and physically accessible to local consumers while supporting local fishers. There's been a lot of growth in seafood networks, particularly because of the pandemic and its impact on fishing and aquaculture industries, as well as impacts on food security for local communities. So we've seen a lot of excitement about seafood hubs because there are some real challenges in the US around adequate seafood consumption, which I'm sure many of you are aware of, but really an underconsumption of seafood. Most Americans, around 80%, are not eating the current USDA seafood recommendations. And we see particular disparities in low income, low education, and young populations. It's thought that consumer attitudes, price, availability, and consumer awareness are the main drivers of current seafood consumption patterns in the US. So seafood hubs have a real promise as a vehicle or approach to address many of these barriers around adequate seafood consumption at the community level. All right, so let's transition from a conversation about seafood hubs broadly to the partnership that emerged in South Central Los Angeles to pilot the Sustainable Seafood Hub. I'll turn it over to Dr. Nathan Churches to introduce the Aquaculture Partners in this effort, who they are, what they do, and why they were interested in getting engaged in this pilot project. Over to you, Nathan.
Okay, so I think I just need to ask you to move slides when I need to move. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
Thanks.
So yeah, my name is Nathan Churches. I'm one of the co-founders and the chief science officer at Holdfast Aquaculture. You've got our info, our website there. Feel free to check it out. And we did this project for our portion of it in collaboration with Santa Barbara Mariculture. And so I'll touch on them towards the end of this. You can go to the next slide. So here's our team, just a quick overview. Diane Kim is our CEO. I'm our chief science officer. And we have Kelly Stromberg as the chief operations and sales officer, and Ian Jacobson as the chief engineer. And what's really interesting and what I think makes Holdfast a success story so far is that we have academics and industry people. So both Diane and myself wear academic hats. We're both active scientists and educators, while Kelly and Ian actively work in the seafood industry. So Kelly knows basically everybody that buys seafood in the Los Angeles area. And Ian is one of the best aquaculture engineers I've ever worked with. He can get water from point A to B like nobody I've seen. So it's a really good mix of people to run this kind of a company. You can go to the next one, Amalia. And so our story is that all four of us wanted to use our scientific backgrounds to help drive the industry. So especially in Southern California and in Los Angeles, there's a real dearth of sustainable aquaculture happening, but that industry is thought to expand. So Noah just mentioned and called out Southern California as one of the best aquaculture opportunity areas. And so with the science backgrounds that Diane and I bring to the table, we wanted to help guide this industry, and we created an industry entity in order to do that. So here's a couple of projects that Diane and I have worked on. In general, we're interested in kelp as food and biofuels, and Diane worked on the kelp elevator project, which some of you may or may not have heard of, but really interesting project. Don't really have time to go into the details, but it's fascinating to look up. And I'm really interested in bivalve genomics, genetics, and selective breeding, how we can take terrestrial examples and bring them into the bivalve breeding world. And so toward this end, I've built science level hatcheries. Here's a photo of some work that I did at Catalina Island at the USC Wrigley Institute on the right, where I built an experimental hatchery and permitted and outplanted and monitored a commercial mock longline so that we could actually have this flow of research directly to impact to industry. You can go to the next slide, Amalia. And so our motto at Holdfast is healthy people, healthy planet, right? And we think that this is a two-way street. Most people here probably know that bivalves and seaweeds, low trophic, sustainable aquaculture needs to be a large part of the future of food on this planet, seafood, but also just food in general. And these are extremely sustainable ways to get high quality proteins and potentially fuels from our ocean. So this just gives sort of a sense of our moral direction that we have at the company. You can go to the next slide, Amalia. And so what do? We're a seed company. Okay, so if you go to Home Depot or the garden store, you can go and pick up any number of seeds, right? You can start any number of tomato varieties in your garden. And if you're an industrial farmer, you can do this at an industrial scale from an industrial seed store, right? There's a parallel that's happening for aquaculture producers, and they, for the most part, buy their seeds from similar seed stores. And so that's what we do at Holdfast Aquaculture. We take, for example, male and female parent oysters, we'll spawn those, we'll raise the larvae until they're, about 1 to 5 millimeters, depending on the species, and we sell that as seed to farmers. You can go to the next slide, Amalia. We do this down in a town called San Pedro, just west of Long Beach, at a facility called Altacey. And Altacey is our landlord technically, but they're also fantastic collaborators, and they have a really excellent vision for developing a blue economy incubator down in the port. So it doesn't quite look like this yet, but I think within the next decade, a facility like this could emerge that has this education center and various bays that push the blue economy forward. And they've already broken ground on quite a bit of their goals, and renovations are starting now. So this is a really exciting place to be doing this work. You can go to the next slide, Amalia. And we'll see if this video works. I hope so. I figured rather than trying to take you through photos, I would share a piece of just basically one of our Instagram stories. Hopefully the volume will work. If not, I can talk over it. So we'll see what happens here. But yeah, if you can just hit play on that video.
Yeah, I'm having some trouble, Nate. I apologize. It had worked in the test run, but is not now. Let's see.
Looks like it's trying to do something.
Yeah.
Okay, well, no matter. I'll just talk
It
through
is.
it, and if it starts playing while I'm talking, that's fine. Essentially, what the video would show is our facilities, how we take mussels and spawn them and actually settle them onto fuzzy rope, for example. The method of actually socking that rope so that we can deliver that to a farmer and we'll retain the mussels on a piece of fuzzy rope, and the actual delivery process and grow out process on a farm. And it also mentions that nobody's done this in Los Angeles, despite 10 million people right outside of our back door. So this is a good business opportunity. And so these are the types of customers that we seek. The mussels that we produce for this project went through Santa Barbara Mariculture. This is a sort of a beacon of a company and a fantastic model for Southern California aquaculture as it seeks to expand the offshore realm. Bernard Friedman is the sort of one-man show out here. He's got a 72-acre farm, and he produces hundreds of pounds or thousands of pounds, hundreds of tons of sustainable seafood every year from his farm. And we work with him directly on producing his seeds, but also working on some value-added products like these pickled and tinned mussels, for example. Okay, you can go to the next slide, Amalia. So I'll just wrap up by saying that this work here was partially funded by the Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission. So they, saw that this industry was expanding, but there were no players sort of working towards this expansion in the Los Angeles area, or very few. And so they funded us and Bernard to create a full cycle, full-scale commercial model with Holdfast and Santa Barbara Mariculture. And so we used some of that money. We said, it's not enough to just produce it locally. We need to also work on distributing it to everybody in the area communities that are proximal to our businesses. And so we took some of those funds, and that's sort of the way that this project that you're hearing about today got started. So with that, I'll turn it over to Heather, who's going to talk to us about CSU, Community Services.
Heather, we may have lost your sound. Oh. Can't hear you.
No, it's still not working.
Make sure you're still. Yeah, maybe go to the back to the phone icon, Heather, or the microphone icon, and just make sure it's still. And if all else fails, you can also join audio via phone call and call in with the number. If you click join audio via phone call under the microphone, it will lead you directly to that phone number. I'll also put it in the chat in case you want to call in.
All right, we could also switch things around a little bit.
She's calling in.
Okay, great. Give a minute, yeah.
Sorry, that's not the whole note.
Thank you, everyone,
Yeah.
for your patience. And Nathan, let's make sure we get out your seed video as well so people can see that. It is a cool video.
The link to our specific Instagram video that I was going to check it out after.
Amalia.
Hi
Hey.
there.
Yep. Hey, Heather.
Hi, can you hear
Yes.
me now?
Yes,
All right.
sounds great.
Sounds like. All right. Sorry, I'm not sure what happens. All my mics show green on this side. I'm not sure. In any case, hi. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Heather Fenney. As said before, I'm currently the director at Community Services Unlimited. We're a nonprofit based in South Central Los Angeles, and we have a long history organizing in our community around health and safety and wellness issues. We were actually started, you can see here on the slide, as the nonprofit arm of the Southern California chapter of the Black Panther Party, and the nonprofit was created in order to support the work that the party was doing around the survival programs at the time. And with the demise of the party in the 80s, CSU continued to organize and do work for many years, and kind of in the early 2000s, that work started to migrate towards using food as a community building and organizing tool. The party has always done food distributions and recognized the importance of food as a central part of building community and connection. And that work has just kind of transformed and grown for us over the years. So what it looks like today is we have a number of different programs that do youth development, community organizing, and training using food as a tool. So we have an urban farm where we do gardening and cooking classes, always with a focus on the cultural food traditions and histories of our community residents, and also engaging in critical conversation about why our food system looks the way it does, functions the way it does, who benefits, who doesn't, who's served, and why specifically our local community, when it comes to issues around food access and such, looks the way it does. So, and then in our work with youth, teaching them skills, public speaking, writing, and advocacy, so they can be part of rebuilding a new food system that serves our community and that gives us greater community sufficiency in meeting our food needs. And so in 2007, kind of a culmination of, or a coming together rather, of the training that we were doing with young people who were then looking for meaningful work to use their skills and knowledge and contribute to their community. And food that was coming out of our urban farms, we created the Village Marketplace, which is a social enterprise aimed at increasing access to affordable, healthy, local, culturally appropriate foods in South L.A. and similar communities around Los Angeles, while also creating jobs, creating market opportunities for small growers, and building health and nutrition through all of our activities. And so that project has grown. We do pop-up produce stands at community centers, kind of like a little mini farmers market. And we grew from that to doing a CSA, like a weekly subscription program. And then eventually we grew to have our own brick and mortar market. And so in 2018, we opened the Village Marketplace Community Food Hub. We have a small market, about the footprint of a corner store, but quality food similar to what you'd get at a Whole Foods. We sell produce from local small farmers. We also buy from urban farmers right here in our neighborhood. We have produce from our urban farm, and then we sell other healthy groceries. And that has included protein like eggs and chicken and fish from local producers. And so we are always interested in connecting with, a greater variety of local growers and using our food hub to build kind of the network for distributing that food in our community. So we not only purchase and distribute food, through our own retail market, but we do wholesale as well, particularly serving local small restaurants and organizations and other small markets that would not necessarily have the buying power for buying the small quantities that might make sense for those markets. And so we do a wholesale business for those smaller markets. And let's see what else. Oh, and then the other thing that we do on the nonprofit side, we have a program where we help individuals enroll in CalFresh, which is what we call food stamps, or the SNAP program here in California. And on the Village Marketplace side, we offer an incentive program. So if you use CalFresh, or like your EBT card, to purchase produce, which is fresh, frozen, canned, or dried, your produce is 75% off. Or there's also, if you spend $1 on non-produce groceries, you get a dollar's worth of produce for free. So shoppers can select which benefit kind of serves them better. And this ensures that everybody in our neighborhood has access to the really high quality product that we're offering, because we do know when we buy from local growers, it can be more expensive because there's not the infrastructure, and we want them to get a fair price for what they're selling to us. And so in order to ensure that that's accessible to everybody, we offer the incentive for EBT shoppers. Similarly, we offer that for our CSA program as well, that if you pay with EBT, a subscription is 75% off. And the other thing that we've done with our CSA program is a tiered pricing system. So we offer it, we have what we call a community rate, which is a little bit less than cost, and we have a supporter rate, which is a little bit higher. And folks self-select, and those who can pay a little bit more, so everybody can have access and ensure that the program is accessible. So all of these lessons that we've been learning focused on produce are lessons that we're taking into our work around the Seafood Hub. And we'll talk more about that, but really how can we ensure that we're still paying growers a fair price, that we're getting the highest quality product that's going to be really desirable and delicious and nutritious for everybody in our community, and but that it's accessible at a price that's accessible in our space. And how do we leverage our food hub to try to serve smaller wholesale customers, like smaller markets and restaurants and things in our community that also maybe wouldn't have access to this quality and this type of seafood because of infrastructure. So we'll talk more about that, but these are some lessons we've learned on the produce side and that we've tried to take into this project.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nathan and Heather. Really helpful. All right, so I just want to briefly add that USCC Grant, USC, San Diego State joined the effort as well to help support tracking successes and challenges of the pilot project through co-developing community surveys and focus groups with Holdfast and CSU. And USCC Grant has also supported CSU in development of educational elements for the project, which Heather will talk about in a few slides. We had 3 major goals for our pilot, which again happened in July 2021. First was to understand existing community seafood preferences and interest in mussels in the community served by Community Services Unlimited, so South Central Los Angeles, Compton, and Inglewood. We had an aim to provide several educational opportunities around sustainable seafood and farmed mussels specifically, including providing 2 pounds of locally farmed mussels for free for community members to try. And thirdly, to test the operational logistics for building out a sustainable seafood hub in South Central Los Angeles, kind of what the ins and outs look like for getting mussels to CSU and their community food hub. All right, so let's dive in. I have a visual of our overall approach to execute the pilot project. You'll note within this flow chart several different colored dots. We have green dots representing operational steps, red dots. Those are the research elements, again, to track and monitor our efforts through IRB reviewed surveys and focus groups, and yellow dots for educational elements. I'll just really briefly walk us through the flow chart, and then in the following slides we'll get into more detail on the different project elements. So as Nathan described, Holdfast and Santa Barbara Mariculture worked to get mussel lines set and outplanted in Santa Barbara. We as a team spent time getting to know each other, especially the new partners, to understand our respective goals for the project and develop an approach for the pilot together. We then developed and implemented a seafood needs assessment survey to inform our efforts and understand what seafood's currently being consumed, understand community identified obstacles to seafood consumption, as well as familiarity and interest in mussels specifically. So I'll talk more about the survey in the next slide. We held a number of educational events in advance of distributing mussels, a workshop on using mussel shells for fertilizer for vegetable gardens, and an Instagram live Q&A with Holdfast Aquaculture, and a live virtual nutrition workshop with a cooking demo for using mussels. And this was around the same time that the participants picked up their 2 pounds of mussels on ice at CSU's Community Food Hub. We also got community feedback on these efforts through survey focus groups and had a chance to debrief as a team to regroup, thinking about the next phase of this effort. All right, so quickly, this seafood needs assessment survey, again, developed to understand where the community's at in terms of seafood and mussel consumption and obstacles before we initiated this pilot. The survey focused, again, on the primary communities that Community Services Unlimited serves, namely South Central, Inglewood, and Compton. We focused on potential seafood consumers, so those without known seafood allergies. And this was a 10-minute online survey administered through Qualtrics, available in English and Spanish, and IRB reviewed. We asked for sociodemographic information, current seafood preferences and consumption patterns, including how often different types of seafood are eaten. We asked about whether survey participants experienced any obstacles consuming the amounts and types of seafood desired, and if so, what those were. And finally, we asked a few questions to understand perspectives on mussels, asking about previous consumption, obstacles to consumption, and interest in future consumption. And what we heard from the seafood assessment was that there is a need and desire for more or different seafood among the participants surveyed. We had 73 complete responses from our targeted population. We heard that 74% of our respondents are eating less than the USDA recommendations of 2 servings per week. Note this is on par with what's been found in previous studies. I mentioned earlier that approximately 80% of Americans aren't meeting USDA recommendations. We also heard that 78% would like to eat more different seafood at home than they do now. And again, we asked about obstacles to eating desired amounts or types of seafood. We heard that price, availability, and seafood knowledge were the top obstacles, which I'll get into in this next slide. All right, so this graph provides a breakdown of those obstacles to desired seafood consumption. You can see that approximately 50% indicated obstacles relating to equity and access, so seafood's perceived as too expensive, and that there are limited options where respondents shop. We also see that around 32% indicate obstacles that can be addressed through education efforts, so not knowing what seafood is healthiest, not confident cooking seafood, not knowing what is environmentally friendly. We also heard from our seafood needs assessment that a majority of our community surveyed had never eaten mussels before, so around 66%, but that a majority were interested in buying mussels from CSU even before we executed our pilot project and provided these farm-raised mussels and educational opportunities around these. So there was a lot of interest and appetite for mussels even before we got started. When we asked about top obstacles to consuming mussels at home, we heard around 50% indicating obstacles relating to educational barriers. Specifically, I don't know how to prepare and cook them. I don't think to buy them. These are the two categories listed at the top of the graph. We were intrigued and excited by these results and the potential for a pilot to really help expand familiarity in seafood comfort zones generally, and also around mussels specifically. So around 25% of the obstacles we saw here were also relating to equity and access. Mussels not available where respondents shop or are too expensive. And overall, our seafood needs assessment highlighted community desire and need for more access to seafood, importance of removing obstacles of expense and availability, and of developing solid educational materials to improve confidence and understanding of seafood consumption and mussels specifically. So I'll turn it over to Heather now to talk more about the educational efforts that were developed as part of this pilot. Heather, are you still there?
Heather, we can't hear you if you're talking, and I think your video is also paused.
Oh.
Yep.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay. Yep. All right. Sorry about that. All right. So one of the programs that we operate is called Garden Gateway, and it's a free gardening and healthy cooking workshop that we offer typically outside of pandemic situations in person at our urban farm. And participants take home the materials connected to the topics of the month so that they can build their garden at home and so that they can try out recipes. So, for example, if we're learning about different models of composting, they'll take home materials to set up their compost bins at home. And if we're learning a particular recipe that we highlight in the garden, then folks take home the ingredients. So that night they can go home right away and try that in their own space. And so it was through this program that we focused on this pilot partnership with Holdfast and USC Grant in this project. And so during the pandemic, we were doing all of our programming virtually, and then folks who participated virtually would have pickup opportunities where they could come and pick up the items so that they could watch the videos at home and then use those items to put those things in play. And so that's the context that we pulled this into. So in the month of June, I think it was June or May of last year, I think it's June, we focused on this. And so on the gardening side, like Amalia said, we did a workshop on building home fertilizers, and we talked with folks about the importance of putting calcium and nutrients back into your soil and how you can use shells in order to do that. And so we created a video that showed folks how to do that, and they could do it with mussel shells, they could do it with oyster shells, with egg shells. It's the same method that folks could use. And then on the nutrition side, we did the workshop on mussels. And so you see a little clip here on there, but now it's on our YouTube channel. And that one we actually did as a live, you know, some of them were pre-recorded and then posted, but this one we actually did as a live video. And then folks could actually cook along with us if they wanted. Because we set it up that they could pick up the mussels ahead of time. And so we had Nate on there, we had Amalia, Diane, other folks from CELC Grant, and it was heavy on the education, so not just about the nutritional benefits, but understanding what aquaculture is and kind of the situation in our local oceans and how mussels can be a part of a healthy diet and all this education related to it. And then we hands-on sat and cooked a really simple recipe. We walked through it together and tasted it, and then folks who had joined in on the feed could also ask questions live, share photos from their own kitchen if they wanted to. And then we had translation on that video, and then you can see we had a handout in English and Spanish that everybody received when they picked up the mussels. And here, if you want to go to the next slide, Amalia. Yeah, so we've got some photos there. You know, it was a lot of learning for us. We worked with a local partner to go up to Santa Barbara and pick up the mussels and transport them down to our hub. And then we had to set up a storage situation, and then we coordinated pickup with community members. So you see a few folks here picking up their mussels. I think there's one more slide with some photos.
That's the only slide we got here.
Oh, yeah, that's the last one. And then we offered folks took home the materials. They got the link to the video, and then some, you know, shared back photos and videos of what they were cooking at home. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Heather. And we had around 55 households received the 2-pound bags of mussels on ice as well, just to add that. So after the educational programming and distribution of mussels was completed, we heard from community members who participated in our feedback survey and focus groups. There were a lot of first-time mussel eaters, around 50% of participants, and the vast majority said that they had a very positive experience with the mussels, with around 92% indicating that they would like to eat more mussels at home after this experience. What was really interesting that came out through our focus groups was that our participants came from a really wide spread of seafood comfort zones, with some really self-described as adventurous seafood eaters and some generally more hesitant. But what was common among this broad range of community participant seafood comfort zones was that trying mussels through CSU specifically was critical to their engagement in the pilot. Having a trusted local source within the community that has proven its care and vouched for quality was what motivated many first-time mussel eaters, even some who had had really bad experiences with food poisoning from mussels in the past, and even some who generally didn't like to eat shellfish, but all, you know, willingly volunteered to participate because they were really motivated by CSU's commitment and engagement in this project. So I've included on this slide a few quotations from participants in our focus groups highlighting this theme of being drawn to participate because the mussels came from a trusted local community source. So some other community feedback we heard in the focus groups and some of these surveys, confusion about what counts as local seafood and whether local seafood is okay to eat given the pollution of many waterways in the LA area. Many participants mentioned that having living seafood was a new experience, having to do the pinch test for mussels to see if they're still alive and monitoring whether shells opened once cooked. So we heard that for many frozen seafood is preferred when purchased kind of near South Central L.A. And so just for some, because they felt it was safer than what can be offered fresh often. So we had several participants actually freeze the mussels in the shell, and we provided additional info on how to best defrost and then cook once the mussels were frozen. So I think kind of for the next iteration, we're going to think about recipes and instructions for those who prefer to freeze or need to freeze just for convenience. We heard some confusion about how sustainable farm seafood really is. Many had heard bad things about fish farming in the past, or fish farming being bad. We also found a lot of interest, and many were motivated by this mussel shell fertilizer workshop specifically. That was their draw to participate in the project. And this concept of full use of the seafood product was really motivating. And finally, just on this point of community feedback, we saw some promising early indication of the economic feasibility of a tiered pricing model for farmed mussels. Heather had spoken to this a little bit already, and kind of how CSU uses this model for vegetables. But when we asked to just start to probe whether those within the broad CSU network would offer to pay a bit more for mussels so others can pay a bit less, there was some indication that this might be one pathway to explore for sustaining distribution of farm mussels and potentially other sustainable seafood through this hub. So I have a slide here, Heather, that kind of talks a little bit about some of the funding incentives for produce. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add here in terms of potential models for the seafood hub to kind of leverage.
No, I mean, I think this model around some kind of rebate or discount for particular shoppers, maybe shoppers using their EBT card, is a good model for us to use. In this case, we're able to fund the incentive through a grant that we have from USDA. Specifically, they have a program called GUSNIP, which supports small markets like ours, offering an incentive to EBT shoppers. Folks might be more familiar. It's something pretty common at many farmers markets, like double up bucks and things like that at farmers markets. And so this is a program that allows that same kind of incentive to happen in small markets. And so that's just a funding opportunity, something that we need to look for, and I think is kind of strategically for folks that want to fund explorations in these hubs, you know, not just investing in kind of the learning, the research, the education, but also being able to fund this type of incentive as part of the project, especially as things get off the ground. And then there is the potential for the program to potentially support itself with a fee structure, you know, where some pay more so that we can support the incentives with others. Thanks, Amalia.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. Great. So I know we're coming up on the hour quickly. So I just want to close out this section. Nathan's going to talk a little bit about what's next, and then we'll turn to questions. But I want to share some big picture lessons learned from this pilot that may be of particular interest to this audience here today. We saw the potential of local seafood hubs to really be infrastructure to build equitable access to local aquaculture. This in turn builds local community support for the industry and expands, you know, a potential consumer base. We found an engagement model of leveraging trusted local food equity focused community partners as really effective in expanding seafood comfort zones and addressing educational needs of historically under-accessed communities. This was really about authentic partnership, really from Holdfast and CSU, who brought on board other trusted research and education partners to move towards these mutual goals that we co-developed. And finally, this pilot project reiterated the continued communication and educational challenges around the health and environmental sustainability of farm seafood, as well as the safety of local seafood in urban environments and what people are carrying with them from what they've heard before. All right, so I'll turn it over to you, Nathan, to talk about next steps for this partnership to build on lessons learned from our pilot.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks. I'll keep this short because I know we're coming up on time, but the future work that we want to focus on really needs to look into two specific groups, producers and retailer communities. So we need to ask more producers if they want to get involved, and we plan to generate a survey that will give us some data and some deliverables, some actionable items to guide the Seafood Hub initiative. Specifically, are there barriers for producers to enter this type of platform, or their price points that they need to hit in order to make it sustainable for their business. At the end of the day, the people that are growing these foods need to make money. So with that same data, we hope to be able to generate a food network or a food map, right? So what nodes in the network are already existing, what nodes can we add, and are there certain nodes that we can strengthen? And then on the retailer side, again, we'd like to perform surveys to see, other retailers that would be interested, specifically carrying local, low-trophic aquaculture products. We need to target, obviously, people that have the shared food justice values that this group does. And we think that there's two ways that we can increase the financial sustainability of the project, and that's finding people with similar missions to CSU that have existing community-based food assets, but also, LA's offers this great juxtaposition of extreme wealth and some poverty-stricken communities, right? And so maybe we can leverage some of those wealthier communities at other storefronts and at other outlets that can help us, achieve financial stability for the project. And then, lastly, if you want to go to the next slide, Amalia, we should talk to other people that are doing similar work. This isn't the first time this type of project has been done. CSU is a real hero in this project and has a ton of experience with, as Heather mentioned, other types of products. So just, engaging with that knowledge more, but also talking to groups that have done similar work, like Fishadelphia, for example, on the East Coast has a really cool tiered pricing subscription-based program where cooler hosts, which are community members and various outlets, will host a cooler, and people can access the food in that way. So not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but pinging groups like Fishadelphia, or on the West Coast, Real Good Fish or Get Hooked are groups doing similar things, and seeing how we can use the lessons that they've learned to fit this into Southern California for the first time. And that's all I have on.
Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think, as we go out and talk about this work more, we're just really starting to do that. We're eager to hear of other kind of analogous groups we can learn from and see how to fit and what fits for our context here. So this is my slide on where we're seeking input. We mentioned that some of these educational materials started to talk and touch on indigenous practices and histories of shellfish aquaculture on the West Coast, but that was something we heard from our community feedback, was that there was a desire for even more. So we're on the lookout for sources and contacts to try and build that out. We also, as we expand, are looking to engage more in other linguistically isolated immigrant populations around sustainable seafood and seafood safety. So where that's been modeled and done well, we'd love to hear about it, and we are digging in to do our homework as well. So I'll stop there. Thank you for your time and attention, and to the funders for this pilot. We welcome questions now or afterwards. You should have our contact info. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amalia, Heather, and Nate. That was a really interesting, super important work. So happy to hear about it. We do have one question from Kim in the chat asking, I think this was back earlier when you were doing, I think, an initial study, asking if you could elaborate what different seafood consumption means.
Yeah, Kim, could you clarify on that? I didn't catch it while I was presenting, so I'm not sure what that was referencing to or what context that was in.
He's typing in the chat. So, yeah, a survey response in the beginning that you did, I think when you were initially trying to find out seafood consumption from the participants.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm assuming this is what you're asking about, and I'm sorry if it's not. Let me know. So we had done kind of a bit of the survey was like a food frequency survey, kind of like they do for diet recalls. So we were looking at seafood consumption for different types of seafood. We had kind of like seaweeds, kind of vegetable. We had fish, and then we had shellfish, and then we had kind of people recall kind of generally on in the last year, kind of how frequently they were eating different categories of those types of seafood. So that was how we started to get at different seafood consumption for participants, kind of the level of consumption of those different types of seafood. I didn't present on any of that here, but I'm still digging into that data to kind of really get a better snapshot of what specifically was being eaten at the time we did that survey. So hopefully that answers your question. Happy to expand on that further. Thanks for the question.
Does anyone else have any questions? I don't know about the presenters, but I'm happy to stay on a couple extra minutes if someone has a question, since we did have some technical difficulties in the beginning. So please feel free to type any questions in the chat. You. So I'll give everyone another minute, but we're getting just some thank yous. So if you have any follow-up questions, email Amalia at the email here, and I'll send out the recording to everyone, as well as with the link to the video Nate shared as well.
Yeah, no, thanks for making the time, everyone. I know there's a lot of demands on people's time. We're just really eager to kind of expand our contacts and kind of learn from others and keep the good work going. But really thankful for Nathan and Heather to be here. They're really the stars of this effort. I've been very happy to support them.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you so much again, and thanks for sticking with us as we worked out Adobe Connect issues. Yeah, I would love to see this project in person. It sounds really cool. So yeah, with that, we'll wrap up the webinar. And if you're on the listserv, you'll hear from us soon about future opportunities. If you're not on the listserv, I only email about these webinars, so you won't get a lot from me. But if you'd like to join, please send me an email, and you'll hear about our next webinar and into the future. So with that, I'm going to close today out. And
Great.
Yeah, thank you again, everyone. And have a good
Thanks, everybody.
evening.
Thanks, Maggie. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.